Okay, so welcome everyone to the Embers of Insight webinar series. It's really exciting to having you all here. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Roy Veraveles, and I am the science coordinator for the Canadian Prairies Prescribed Fire Exchange, and I will be the webinar's moderator today. So just a reminder to everyone that this webinar will be recorded and posted on our YouTube channels. Just a little bit of background about the Embers of Insight. This is produced through a collaboration between the Great Plains Fire Science Exchange and the Canadian Prairies Prescribed Fire Exchange. And this year, we are exploring the topic of prescribed burn associations through a series of webinars, specifically. So last week, we hosted John Weir. Continuing today with Ben Wheeler, and wrapping up next week with a panel of prescribed burn associations from the US and Canada. If you miss any of these sessions, record versions are going to be available on our YouTube channel, so you are welcome to visit those. Since this is a collaboration with the Great Plains Fire Science Exchange, I would like to introduce Lori Bamerlin from the Great Plains. Lori, do you want to say hi to the audience?
Yes. Hi, everyone. I am the outreach coordinator for Great Plains Fire Science Exchange. I will be monitoring chat, so if you have questions, feel free to drop those in there, and then I'll compile them and share with Ben at the end.
Thank you, Lori. So just a reminder to everyone to please keep your microphones off, and you're welcome to keep your videos on or off, that whatever you feel more comfortable with. And as Lori mentioned, please keep your questions, put it in your chat box or unmute yourself at the end of the session. So one last thing, when you log off at the end of the webinar, you will be invited to complete a short optional anonymous feedback survey to help us improve this webinar series. With those items covered, let's meet our speaker today. So Ben Wheeler is a private land wildlife biologist who co-founded and has coordinated the Loup TREX program since 2009. I'm pretty sure he's going to explain all of those details. He's been supporting prescribed fires and prescribed burn associations across central Nebraska, and he's really passionate about empowering communities to lead effective sustainable fire programs and sharing his experience with partners. It is really fantastic to have Ben Wheeler here. So he'll be presenting a story today, A Tale of Two Fires. So Ben, welcome, and please take it away.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's always super humbling, and still exciting to get invited to present at places like this. It's so fun to be able to share the work that we're doing in our areas. I'm imagining you guys get invited to talk elsewhere, and everyone where they're working is just proud of the work that they're doing. And when you get an opportunity to share some of those things, it's just fun and it's exciting, and hopefully for the rest of this group, a little bit empowering to the rest of you. And I hope that we can give you some ideas, some insights, maybe just things that you can take with you to empower some of the work that you're doing. I'll share my screen now and then switch over to a slideshow. But I am a wildlife biologist. I'm in central Nebraska, right in the middle of the Great Plains in the United States. And I've been here since 2008 in the same exact position that I was back then. I grew up in Indiana, further east of here, a few states, kind of in the corn, soybean desert, and moved here kind of as a transplant. I did my graduate work in Kansas, in western Kansas at Fort Hays. And after that, spent a couple years kind of as a journeyman wildlife biologist, and then eventually moved up here in my current position back in 2008. So if I could back you up a little bit, clear to when I started back in 2008 as a wildlife biologist, we were doing wildlife work. We're creating habitat plans for people in the central part of Nebraska. We're getting involved with things like the Conservation Reserve Program, so getting row crop planted back to grasslands. We're working on food plots and just anything that a private landowner would come into our office and say, hey, I'm looking to do something for wildlife. We would try and help you out. come up with a plan, maybe find some funding, and get you on the road for success. Nebraska, like many of the Great Plains state, is predominantly private lands. 98% of our land is private land, and so anytime that we're looking at doing meaningful wildlife conservation on the land, we have to take in private lands as a significant consideration. And so one of the things that we did clear back in 2008 is we got started with fire on private lands, and we started looking at how can we get private landowners involved in fire. What can we do as an organization and as a group of staff to help empower private landowners to do fire? And so one of the things that we began doing was encouraging and promoting the use of prescribed burn associations. And I think you guys are familiar with that term. It sounds like John Weir came and talked to you guys last week about it, so you probably know the ins and outs of it. But yeah, we would get people together, get these landowners together kind of in a certain geographic location, and help them scratch each other's backs. If they had a fire that they would like to do, and they needed people, and they needed equipment, and they needed time, they could help each other get that stuff done. We had a number of these trailers there in the lower right that we built. I think we have about 20 of those statewide now. And inside of these trailers, we have a few drip torches, fire shirts, radios, hand tools, and then there's 200 tanks with pumps that you can slide into the back of a pickup. And so that gave you 2 engines. And we felt really good about this, that, yeah, we're going to get a lot of really good, fun fire on the ground, and it's going to make an impact. And within the contents of that trailer, we were able to impact the ground. It was a growing momentum, and we could do a 20 or a 30 acre fire with the stuff in that trailer. It had everything you needed to do kind of that basic prescribed fire, and we felt really good about what we were doing. If we got really, really excited and we felt pretty courageous, we might tackle a 100-acre fire. And that was good work at that time back in 2008. So if you've ever been in Nebraska, or I mean, there's a lot of places in the Great Plains that look like this. We have juniper encroachment happening all over the place. If you look at this looks like a really severe example, and it is for sure, but it is not an uncommon example or a rare example. We have landowners, and this is working ground, this is grazing land, that are talking about losing 60 or 70% of their grazing capacity. And I don't know about you guys, but if I lost 60 or 70% of my paycheck, it would be a big deal. And that's what some of these people are facing. Not to mention the grassland wildlife that requires these grasslands that are now turning into juniper woodlands. We're really losing a lot of that. This looks like an isolated example. And you can see just beyond these trees, there's a little bit more open ground, but look to the far horizon. You can see where it's picked back up, and we have thick juniper encroachment there as well. When we asked the Nebraska Forest Service, so kind of our state forestry agency, what our juniper encroachment looks like, they were telling us at the time, and I don't think it's changed a whole lot, that we're losing 40,000 acres in Nebraska every year to closed canopy juniper forest. So this is full 25-foot trees under there. Underneath those trees, there's nothing growing. It's just kind of a needle duff layer. And if you are running cattle, you don't do well on cows eating nothing, and they won't eat cedar trees. In my office years ago, we did a little experiment on the whiteboard where we started to check if we had 40,000 acres of encroachment every year, and after 10 years, and we didn't do anything about those 40,000 acres, what would that end up amounting to? And we figured that it would end up being an $88 million statewide loss to our local grazing economy, which is a big deal. And that's not even counting what would be lost to our wildlife conservation, which is what brought us into the fold. When you look at this, one of the primary species I work with is greater prairie chickens. I think there's some areas where they kind of get up into Canada. One of the surrogate species you would have up there are sharp-tailed grouse, and they kind of follow the same trends. They're a little bit different, but you can think of them in this example. So for a greater prairie chicken, if you have one tree every acre, that species, greater prairie chickens, will no longer nest in that area. If you have 3 trees in that same area in 1 acre, they just move out altogether. And so when you're looking at this picture right here, all of a sudden you're saying, well, where do they even go? Is there even any area in the whole scope of this photo for greater prairie chickens anymore? And quite honestly, the answer is no. And so that's where we as wildlife biologists get involved, and we say, we've got to step in, we've got to do something, or these birds are just going to be out. And so I had a colleague of mine back in 2009. His name's John Ortman. He previously worked with the Nature Conservancy. He came into my office and he dropped a map on my desk. He just slid it on there, and he said, I've been making some notes on this map, and I've had some ideas, and I looked at this map, and it involved 5,000 acres of a burn unit. Meanwhile, we're burning with our local people. We're burning 20 or 30 acres at a time. And so this was a little bit incomprehensible to me. And he said, yeah, we have this program that we've done in the past, back when I worked with the Nature Conservancy, where we bring in firefighters from all over the country, all over the world, that need to build their qualifications. And then we basically create a big playground for them to come work on their live fire experiences, so they can build qualifications. They can kind of work up the ladder, whatever agency they're from. And I looked at this map, and John walked back to his desk, and I stared at this map for a while and tried to wrap my head around it. And 10 minutes later, I walked into John's office and I said, John, we can't not do this. We're burning 20 or 30 acres at a time, and we're just not catching up. We'll never get to the point where we can tackle 40,000 acres a year. We have to try this where we're burning bigger. Our local burn capacity, our local PBAs aren't at that level yet. They're growing, they're getting better, they're building. But meanwhile, every year we're losing 40,000 acres. We have to at least try this. And so in 2009, we got a bunch of landowners together. We sent out these flyers to them to come into a meeting. And if you want to get a bunch of private landowners at a meeting in a very conservative part of the country, send them in the mail something that has their name on a map, and they will show up. And they're going to wonder, why the hell is my name on this map? And so we get together in this garage of one of the ranchers and kind of pitched this idea to them. And it went a little bit like this. We got together with them, and we had them in front of us. And we said, well, here's a map of what we'd like to do. We understand that you have never burned, but we have this idea for a program where we can look at 5,000 acres at a time. We'd like to bring in a bunch of strangers that you don't know and we've never met to come burn this. And we've never done this before either, but we think you'll like it. And we hope you'll let us do this. And we've, since 2009, we readjusted our pitch, and we built a lot of street cred with our program over the years. But between John's ruddy good looks and my personality, I guess a bunch of people said, yeah, I guess we'll do this. I don't know why they said that, but they did. And 2010, we put our first Loup TREX on the ground in March of that year. And we did this with no money at all. At that point, there were all these agencies, most of them at that time were federal agencies, felt like we need to get our staff live fire experiences. We need to get them on as many as we can, and they were paying for training. They paid their staff to come, and they paid their wages, they paid their hotels, they paid their food, and so it ended up working pretty well. We've adjusted, we've evolved over the years, and we do have grant funding for the program now. But those first stages are kind of fun to look back on and see where we've gone. So our Loup TREX is held as a two-week federal incident. People come in from all over the country, from all over the world, for 2 weeks in late March, and we've done good work. This is in that top picture is in Ord, Nebraska, just kind of coming up with the plans for the day. And you can see this little room that we have is full of a lot of people that are just excited to get out there and do good work. You can see even in the map that Dan is pointing at, it's a big area. In that year, I think we were trying to tackle about 6,000 acres, and we were doing good work. But this is kind of just a photo collage of what those 2 weeks look like, and we get everybody a lot of really intense fire experience out on the ground. During that 2 weeks in late March, anything can happen with weather, and so sometimes we get locked into a room, and we can't do fire during that period. Sometimes we get blizzards, sometimes we get high winds or red flag warnings, and that keeps us inside. But we still make sure that we have an active learning environment in there. And over the course of those years, there's been a couple years where we took off either to like extreme drought or burn permit allocation, or one year we were in between grants and we did a couple things things differently there. We had the COVID year of 2020, and this little marker here doesn't include what we were able to get done last year as well, but we have in the year since 2010, we've had an impact over 35,000 acres, which is really, really cool to look at. Again, thinking in the background, meanwhile, we're losing 40,000 acres every year. And so that was a little bit of a sobering thought. And so if you look specifically at our Loup TREX, this idea that we're going to bring big fire to the land where we're really only doing small fire, we have a lot of outputs. We've had several hundred people come from all over the country, all over the world, 25 different states, 7 different countries have been involved. We've even had people from Spain, from Ecuador. We had a gal from South Africa that was representing South Africa National Parks that was looking at developing a prescribed fire program for their parks down there in South Africa, and was just looking at different models of how to do it. And she came here to see, well, how are they doing it, and how can that be translated into what we're doing in South Africa. There's been gallons of ink that have been spent on task book items to get people the qualifications they came for. And then over the course of those years, we've treated over 35,000 acres. And those are great numbers that we can certainly celebrate and be proud of. But what I'm more interested in is the outcomes. What has this done outside of those specific units that we've had? What has this done for our local area here in Nebraska beyond what those individual firefighters are coming for? We built great relationships with our emergency management systems. So sometimes on those days off, we'll go and we'll tour local fire departments, and they love having us come, and we build some trust there, some trust that ends up extending into some of our private landowners. We even invite our local fire departments to come and join us on fires. We began to, by burning big and focusing big, cross-boundary fires are becoming a lot more common in our area. And cross-boundary fires just meaning fires that involve more than one landowner, where we're no longer burning 20 acres, all my land, but we're now burning within our local burn groups that are watching our Loup TREX. They're beginning to become more acquainted with people burning across fence lines and working together. We began night fires, and this is a really fun story. When we first started night fires, nobody liked the idea of it in our towns, and they eventually gave us a little bit of a key that we could start to do that. And night fires in our area are just beautiful. Sometimes when we have multiple days in a row of red flag warning, the only time that we get weather to do fire is in the evening when things become a little bit more moderate. It was a lot of fun. You know, the first time that we did a fire like this, we had multiple calls to dispatch reporting a wildfire, and dispatch would call us, and we would say, no, everything's going well. And then a couple years ago, we had a night fire on one of our TREX sites, and this was right next to a blacktop county road. And I saw a vehicle pull up, a big SUV, and just park right next to our fire. And I thought, boy, I probably need to go over there and talk to them. And so I'm driving in my little quad over there to talk to them. And while I'm on my way, I'm going through my mind, okay, here's the talking points I should cover with them. This is why we do fire at night. This is why it makes it safer. This is why the glow looks so big where you're at, but everything's actually really, really fine. And when I rolled up there, the window rolls down, and inside this vehicle, there's 4 women with a bottle of wine, and they're just watching the show. And so we're just giving them this gift that they're taking advantage of. But we get a lot of community exposure with our Loup TREX. Our local brewery here in small Ord, Nebraska, is every year when we do our TREX has a prairie fire brew that they put on. And so we do our best to try and get as intimately involved with our local community and make sure that they know how they fit within fire and that they are an active part of that fire story. We also provide, with the big work that we do, anchors for additional fire. And so in here, you can see all this green area in that picture with area that we burned during our Loup TREX, and it's starting to green up. And after our TREX event left, after that 2 weeks, those local landowners that were used to burning 20, 30, 40 acres at a pop looked at the 4-mile black area that we created, and they scratched their heads and said, you know, here's an opportunity where we can really put some good work on the ground. And they would begin to take build fire units, and blow it into the black that we had created. A couple years ago, I think it was 2019, we were up near Burwell, Nebraska, and after our 2 weeks, there was 6 or 7 different fires that got pushed into our burn unit. And so that leaves us with not only burning 4,000 acres during that year, but there's an additional 1,800 acres that is burning into it. And in that additional 1,800 acres, that is local landowners that are learning about how to use fire, not just our qualified burn crew that comes during the TREX. During our fires, during our TREX, we also invite our local PBAs to come join us. And so if you look at this top picture, there's a lot of Nomex up there, but there's also a lot of denim. There's a lot of Carhartt, and just people joining us and learning about our fires. This gives them exposure to how they can burn big. They join us for a day where we're burning 900 acres, and they see that we're using these really shiny fire trucks, and that we have all these qualifications. And some people come in uniforms. The things that they're wearing look different than us. They're wearing hard hats. But when they actually join us on a fire, they start picking this stuff apart, and they say, you know what, they're not really doing anything that we are unable to do. And all of a sudden, the idea for burning bigger than 20, 30, 40 acres becomes unlocked, and it becomes accessible just by them joining us on the fire line that day. But we always love having these people join us. And even as we're doing the Loup TREX over these years, our local burn group is growing and growing and growing in that meantime. And you can even see in that lower right-hand picture, one of our local burn leaders in our PBA is actually giving instruction to one of our qualified firefighters and beginning to lead them. And so we're developing these PBAs in a leadership capacity as well. So these local groups continue to grow while our TREX is going on, and growing in a lot of different ways, because in the end, we do need to transfer this back over to the Loup TREX back over to our local capacity. and they're beginning to build capacity. They're looking at the lessons that we're providing, the example that we're providing on the Loup TREX, and they're taking that to heart. And so you look at the top picture there with this military surplus trucks. These are becoming a lot more. They're becoming a lot more common in central Nebraska and all over the state, where people are getting a hold of these. And these things will drive almost anywhere, and they can pull 1,000 gallons with them. And so it's like 1,000-gallon billy goat that you have on your line. And what's really cool about these trucks is how it shifts just the attitude and the behavior of people on a fire. If you're doing the first fire on your ground and you see one of these trucks roll up before your fire, if you were nervous before, you can watch your blood pressure drop by about 20 points just by having one of these big trucks come to your fire. And all of a sudden you feel like, you know what, maybe if they're here, we can do this. The one to the right, to the left is maybe the most famous engine in the United States. This was built by a local landowner. He's now a board member of our burn association several years ago, and he came to my office with this itemized list, like a receipt, and said, "I built my engine. I built a truck." And he said, "You'd never guess what I paid for it." And he kind of quizzed me on it. And if you look at it, it doesn't look like a whole lot. But he paid $1,300 for that whole thing. And that's including the truck. But this is just Great Plains ingenuity, where he went to the scrap pile and he pulled out some old iron. He traded some things. He found some stuff at an auction. I think the only thing that's new on that is the reel, which he got just at a farm and garden store. I wouldn't try and drive this thing to Ohio necessarily, but it's been on almost every fire and it's reliable. And what I get excited about people building their own engines is that is a commitment to fire. They have this parked right beside their combine for harvesting corn. But engines in our group can look really different, and they can sometimes look really primitive, but they still get good work done. Here's another example. These guys were driving next to me, coming up on me in a fire, and you can see the look of the driver. He's like, why are you taking a picture of us? And I just thought it was wonderful, because this guy on the back is sitting on a saddle. And this to me is just like the incorporation of local culture in on these fires. And they were doing good work. We have people in our local burn group that are getting involved. They're even writing their own burn plans. And so this guy loves writing his own burn plans. He hands it in to me every year. It's on lined paper, and it gets no presentation points. But if you actually read through that, it's thoughtful. It's well developed. You can tell that he's thinking about how to do his fire, and it's not on a formal template. It's not anything formal at all, but it's a well thought out plan. We get everybody involved, and so sometimes I have a colleague out in California. Maybe some of you know her. Her name's Lenya, and one of the things she likes to bring up is fire is for everyone. And so if you have someone that you're working with and they say, "Well, I'm too old to do fire," what I like to ask is, can you hand out water? Can you drive a golf cart and hand out water on a fire? Because if I'm kind of in the heat of working on a fire and you roll up and you can hand me a bottle of water, you're my hero. Or if you can hand me a couple cookies to stash in my pocket, you're playing an important part on that fire as well. Here on the right, that's Avery. She was in kindergarten at that time, and she's with her mom, and she's writing down notes from weather observations for the day. And so she's getting involved in fire as well, even at a young age. And we're not pulling kids out here just for photo ops. We're making sure that they have meaningful roles in the fire. The one in the middle there is my little guy Carter, and he's helping with mop up, just spraying down any hot spots on the edge. And then also making sure that we acknowledge the people that serve us food at the end. When we have a prescribed fire, I require that our people mention the people serving food at the end as part of our fire. And so in making sure that they know that they're involved in a very meaningful way. Oops, wrong way. This is something I'm really excited about. So again, about bringing our community and having our community involved as much as possible and making sure that these non-traditional kind of fire folks are know where they sit within the fire story. A couple years ago, I took in a couple of drip torches into our local saw shop, and they had been seeing smoke, and they knew that there's fire going around the community. And anytime I would go in there, they would ask good questions. And so I went in there and I just said, I gave them 2 torches and I said, would you guys be interested in selling these? And just having them here and selling them if people came in. And they said, yeah, I guess we can. And so they left them on their counter. And I said, in 3 months, if I'll come back, and if they're still here and you haven't sold any, I'll take them back and I'll get them out of your way. If you sell them, go ahead and keep the money. Like, I want this to be something that works for you. And I came back 3 weeks later and they had already sold 7. And that was just so cool. I felt like at that point in our little town of Ord, population 2,200, Ord, Nebraska, I can go out in this small town right now and I can buy a shovel, I can buy a wheelbarrow, I can spend $500,000 in our little town and buy something that harvests corn. With fire being one of the most rapidly growing sources of grassland management, why can't I find somewhere in town to buy a drip torch? And so I took one to them and they said, yeah, we will. And they still have them on their counter, and they've sold, I don't know how many since. That was a couple of years ago. And to my knowledge, it's the only place in the United States, maybe the only place in the world, where you can buy a drip torch at a saw shop. And one of the benefits of this is everybody that goes into that saw shop, whether they're buying a chainsaw or whether you can see in the background, if they're buying a lawnmower or a weed eater or anything else, or a leaf blower, when they get to the counter to pay for that, they're looking at drip torches, and it almost invariably begins a conversation. So this little saw shop becomes a new hub for discussing prescribed fire. But they're growing. They're doing really, really good work. In the meantime that our TREX is going on year after year after year, our local group keeps growing and growing and growing. They're becoming leaders. We've even elevated some of these folks where they're teaching our burn workshops. They're building their own equipment. A couple years ago, I had one of them ask, they said, hey, should we take a picture before one of our fires? And I said, yeah, I don't know why we've never done that. And so you can look at the bottom there, and that's our little group of Rough Riders. And it's been a lot of fun to watch. This was I would call a small fire at that time. This was a fall burn. We didn't have a whole lot of people show up because people were cutting corn that day, but it was really cool to see everybody there. And I can look through this list of people in the bottom photograph there, and I can give you a story of everybody that's involved and what they contribute to our burn group in different and unique ways. One of my favorite parts of my job is going out after the fire when we start having green up. And so we get really caught up with pictures of torching cedar trees. We get really caught up with pictures of black, but I think one of the things that we need to become more focused on is the green. Many of you are probably familiar with the term the green glacier, which is like kind of the woody encroachment that's moving through the Great Plains. I have a different idea of green glacier, where we're talking about the green up and the protein content that happens after a fire. I feel like this is what we should transition into. Why we're burning. We're burning for grass. We're not burning to run away from trees. We're burning to encourage grass. And I think that's a whole new mentality that I think a lot of people can get behind, especially the folks that are a little bit nervous about fire. If you can begin to talk about fire, not just in terms of killing cedar trees with crown runs that are carrying through their pasture, and we're going to try and hold it at the end. If you can begin talking to them about protein content following the fire, weight gains, I'm beginning to try and collect more and more of these stories from people's experience. And I had one person stop in my office just last year, and he said, "You know what? I've got an example for you." He said, "Where I graze after my fire, my conception rate on my cow-calf pairs goes from 84% to 98%. Now, I don't know the mechanism of what's behind that, but what I do know is if you change a conception rate from 84% to 98%, that's big in terms of dollars and cents. And all of a sudden, we have a new way of being able to encourage and promote fire to maybe some resistant landowners or maybe landowners that aren't sure they want to do it yet." So I want to tell you a story about another fella here. This is Alan. He's turning away from the photograph here, not on purpose. He's just kind of looking to see what the fire is going on there. I was trying to snap a picture of him without him knowing it, and this is the only way I could do it. So 2 years ago, Alan came into my office, and Alan is someone who doesn't miss a fire. He's a member of our local burn association, and he volunteers his time anytime that the Loup TREX is in town. He will be there with his quad. He's a quiet man. He is totally content with just doing backdoor patrol. He doesn't need to be at the front. He doesn't need to be holding a drip torch. He doesn't need to be the leader barking orders to everybody. But he's also very introspective, and he'll sit back and he'll in the back watching our back door. And when I drive by him, if I'm leading a burn, I'll ask him, "Hey, Alan, what are you seeing here?" And he usually has really good insight on some of these things. And so he came into my office a couple of years ago, and he dropped, just like John did, a map on my desk. And he said, "I've been thinking about some of this stuff." And you could see it's plat map where he has been putting some chicken scratches on, just some ideas. And he said, "I have an idea of a really big fire. And this is similar to like our Loup TREX fires." And he said to me, "I was wondering if you would consider using this area as a site for your treks." And so here I have Alan, who's helped on as many treks as he can. He's involved in our burn association. He's always helps, and he never asks for anything. And if there was anybody who ever deserved to have a Loup TREX event fall right in their lap, it's him, for sure. But I pushed the map back to him, and I told him no. And I almost, soon after that, I thought, "Oh boy, I hope I don't regret that." But I told him, "Alan, I think our group over the years that the Loup TREX has been here, I think our local group is ready to tackle something like this." And I pushed him into a leadership position for this fire, coordinating, doing a lot of the things that get involved. And he kind of backed away. He's like, "I don't know. I don't know if I'm that person." And I just kept providing him encouragement. And I said, "You know what, Alan, let's just start with this first step. Get a hold of the people here, and let's get together for a meeting and just talk to them about what something like this could look like. We'll meet in a community center, just some meeting room. We'll show some maps. We'll talk about how this could work. For sure, we don't know exactly how this will all work, but we'll at least get everybody together and talk to them. But at least right now, just contact everybody and let them know what we're thinking." He said, "Okay, I'm not sure how this is going to go over, but I'll try." And then I get this a couple days later, I get this wonderful text message from Alan. And if you work in private lands conservation, this is the message that you want to get any day on anything that you're working on. And this just totally uplifts and is the work that you're doing and makes you feel like maybe you're making a difference. But these are the ones that you want. And so Alan, over the course of the next year, began doing a lot of work. Upper left there, you can see that he's getting out and he's beginning to talk about here's where some potential fire lines are. Bottom left, we're getting together in meetings and he's discussing with intent different fire lines that we could use and how we can do this and where we need to post water and all this different stuff. He helped coordinate a lot of blacklining and 2 Decembers ago, we did 7 days and 8 miles of blacklining, which is tedious work. But the following spring, you can see in the bottom right, this is what it looked like where we blackline. It's just green, and this is just a beautiful, beautiful black line that turns green that you would love to burn off of. And here's an example of that. This is the burning that we ended up doing, and everything in the gray line there is everywhere that we blacklined. The brown lines are going to be county roads, and so we didn't get everything around it, but we got a lot that really, really helped us. And so I want to cover with you guys just this last year where we were at, and look at our Loup TREX and compare it to this fire that Quiet Alan put together. And what's really interesting, and this is total coincidence, is these two fires had the same exact acreage, down to the gnat's ass. It was 2,500 acres. If you compare these two by the number of people that showed up, last year we had 30 people sign up for the Loup TREX. On this fire that we did in that Alan put together, the day of the fire, we had 72 people show up. On our Loup TREX, we best to get as much done as we can, but we're really reliant for our event. We had 5 engines on the Loup TREX, and in this on Alan's fire, we had 16 different engines show up. A big part of all this is that with our Loup TREX, it's a 2-week event, and so we have people come in for just 2 weeks. With our PBA work, people live there. They call this home, and they're there year round. And so we weren't constricted to that 2-week period. And what's maybe more important than everything is that our Loup TREX that we had planned for last year, the complex that we put together, didn't get done. We got maybe half of it done. And with all the work and the prep work that Alan put together on that Western Valley County fire, not only did we get it completed, but we did that whole thing in 3.5 hours, which was really, really cool to see. Not only just with the number of people and the number of engines, but the prep work that was done beforehand just really helped us get all of that completed in a timely fashion. And so what we learned from this was the Loup TREX over the years has become less and less necessary. When we first started in 2009 and 2010, our Loup TREX was the big fire game in town, and not only are we the big fire game in town, we're not even the best. And what it showed us was the Loup TREX needs to step back. And so this upcoming year, in a month from now, we will be holding our very last Loup TREX. And so if you want to get in on it, you can, but this will be the last one, and for good reason. Our local group has taken up the reins, and they're doing really, really good work, and they're outpacing the stuff that we were able to do. Afterwards, this is the green up picture that I love, that I always love touring around. Here's Alan in the middle with his Nebraska Cornhusker sweatshirt, and not all the landowners, but several of them. We did a tour around afterwards, and all of them did just great work getting everything ready for this fire. The one clear on the right there, that's Jerry, and that was his truck that we saw at the beginning that he paid $1,300 for, that he's so proud of. But this is the group of landowners that Alan helped pull together for this fire. I gave this presentation, or a similar one, very similar this past December at the so it's got a long name, the International Fire Ecology and Management Congress. They asked me to come present, and just the day before that, at the Nebraska Prescribed Fire Council meeting, Alan, for the work that he did, was presented with a statewide award. And so it was really cool for him to get that there in Nebraska, and then also to highlight him at an international meeting for his good work. And hopefully Alan and the work that all these guys are doing is inspiring to other people as well. When I was at that meeting, during the presentation, I told you that one of the things that I love doing is is just making sure that our community knows where how they are important in our fire story, even if they're not even on the fire. So from our saw shops to the people cooking meals to the people that are providing water tenders, everybody should know. And I love making sure that other people outside know that story as well. And so during my presentation, I just asked, how many people in this audience have heard of Ord, Nebraska? Ord, population 2,200, a place that I'd never heard of even before I took this job. And it's really cool to see how many hands were raised. And I think that's a really cool way to show that a lot of this different work that we're doing in these little communities are impacting and inspiring people in bigger areas. And if you zoom in, I mean, you can see not everybody raised their hand, but that's a lot of hands to go up in an international meeting in New Orleans, Louisiana, about a kind of a small rural community in Nebraska. It's really, really cool to see. I'll do a shameless plug here. So some of you may be familiar with this book. This is Maura O'Connor, and she's a freelance journalist. She does work for The Atlantic. She does work for the New York Times and a few other places. A couple of years ago, she put together this book, Ignition, and she was just looking at ways fire is being used across the world, ways fire is being threatening across the world. And this is a lovely, lovely book that she put together. Maura's very first fire was on the Loup TREX a few years ago. And the Loup TREX plays a big role in this book, but she also explores other areas as well. And maybe some of you here, your story is in this book. But she's beginning another story right now. I don't think it's going to be in a book format, but she's exploring a fire journey of one of our PBA members here in Nebraska, and I'm excited to see how that goes. We did after this book, Pheasants Forever was gracious enough to do a podcast with myself and Maura. If you want, you can look that up if you have some windshield time and you just want a good listen. It's about an hour long. And just look up the On the Wing podcast with Pheasants Forever, and right there is the title. It's episode 257. But yeah, it was a lot of fun doing that episode with Maura. And with that, if anybody has any questions, this was so fun to share our story with you guys, and I'd be happy to take any questions if you have them.
There are no questions in the chat, so if you want to feel free to unmute themselves and ask, that'd be great.
No questions at all?
I think, Scott, you're trying to talk, but we cannot hear you.
I got a set of speakers plugged in so I can hear. I missed most of the webinar. I apologize, but is there a chance of getting a copy of it sent out to me when things are done here?
Yes, it'll be on the Canadian Prairies Prescribed Fire Exchange website and YouTube, as well as Great Plains Fire Science Exchange website and YouTube, and then we'll send out a follow-up as well. Go ahead, Rennie.
Hey, thanks, Lori. Thanks, Ben, for your wonderful talk. This is the second time I've heard your talk. I was one of the people in the crowd waving their hand when you asked about Ord, Nebraska, down in New Orleans. So I think it's an incredible story that you shared, talking about how the evolution of your TREX program leading into the PBA program, which actually led into the landowners taking ownership of prescribed fire in the community. So I think it's a great model for us to learn from here in Canada, and I really appreciate you sharing that story and taking the time for us. Really appreciate it. Question though is from your experience working with those local communities to build the PBA or to build that leadership, how would you build that leadership in that local community? Because you work for an agency, nonprofit organization, but how do you build that partnership in that local community from that landowner basis?
Yeah, that's a great question, Rennie. So you begin by doing kind of your standard fires and bringing in some sometimes even people that you trust from your agency, bringing them in, and then eventually with this focus on weaning this group off and becoming more dependent upon themselves. So at some point and these are little levers that you just kind of learn when to push and when to pull back and when to push and when to pull back. And when you see someone on the fire line during a fire that's giving someone some instruction and it's good instruction, at some point you ask them, and we do this actively, you ask them, would you be comfortable just leading a flank of this fire? You've got a good crew behind you. You have a big safety net, and you just begin asking these questions. Would you be willing to step up? Would you be willing to step up? Would you be willing to give a presentation about? I've asked Jerry before when our TREX comes to town, and he has his $1,300 truck there. I ask him, hey, on one of our snow days, would you come and present to our TREX group about how you built your truck and things that you did, things you would do different? I asked a few of our members to come and be panel members for just a Q&A session during our TREX. If we have someone who is thinking about doing a fire but has never done it before, I will encourage them to ask one of these landowners within our group, hey, go ask them. They did a really good job with their prep work on that fire that looks similar to yours. And so you just do these little things that just build up their confidence, build up their competence, and just elevate them even more. So where that story becomes more their story every time. We have one member in our group that takes care of our radios, and that just kind of happened by asking, hey, would you be willing to put in an order for radios this time? We have one member who's a plumber, and so if anybody has a problem with their engine and they ask me about it, he does well stuff with agricultural wells, and I say, yeah, you know what, so and so's a plumber, you could go ask them. And so you're just by opportunity building up these leaders in kind of non-traditional ways, without having any quals. The only one that has any quals within our group is me. But just making sure that you're intentional about asking people to step up. And sometimes they say no. And when they do, you say, I accept your no, but I'm impressed with what I'm seeing from you. I will probably ask again. But making sure they're appreciated, making sure that they know they're doing a good job, and asking them to step up when they're comfortable. Sometimes, I guess, to back off that a little bit, Rennie, I guess what I'm saying is sometimes that doesn't have to be a leap into you're going to be the burn boss. I know you've never done this before or anything like it, but it's just taking those little incremental things from radios or from prep work, or if someone just puts in a really good mow line, just having someone take a look at the work that they do.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Ben. Yeah, growing that leadership within everyone, right? So really appreciate that. Thank you.
I don't know if there is any more questions from the audience. I don't see anything in the chat, but I just gonna say, Ben, it has been really inspiring to me, seeing all this work and prescribed burn associations taking over almost for the TREX, the Loup TREX is really exciting to see. I wonder how how do you see what are the barriers that they have faced and how they have overcome those barriers of like leadership or training or all of those aspects?
Yeah, and we face new ones every year. I mean, when we first started, if you look at where we began our fire group years and years ago to where we're burning now, everything was a barrier. Just having people with experience was a barrier, and building those up, having people as leaders, like we just talked about with Rennie, was a barrier. And so just making sure that we are tackling those at pace and not trying to tackle too much at one time. And so encouraging people to build their own equipment was a huge step for us. And making sure that we let them be those heroes instead of taking that all on ourselves and doing all that. We could have just given them, instead of them building their own equipment, we could have just built 6 more burn trailers and put them here that we own. But I think there's a commitment, there's a personal commitment when they build their own. I think a big barrier that we crossed, and we kind of talked about this in the presentation, was when we went to cross-boundary fires. And then all of a sudden there's people that are working together and having a vision together. And so that was a big barrier that we crossed. And one of the barriers that I think a lot of people think about is liability and insurance. And one of the things that we noticed when we began doing cross-boundary fires, when people began looking at how can I incorporate all my neighbors into this fire. So the fire that Alan put together, I think, had 13 different landowners, like neighbors. And so you would think, naturally, this fire is getting bigger. We're more exposed to liability, but what we have seen is exactly the opposite. Where I have more landowners involved, if the fire gets out, it's on someone else's, it's on someone's ground that's already involved in the fire. And so you essentially become a little bit self-insured there, which is really exciting to think about. Since our fires have become bigger and our cross-boundary fires have become more popular, the word liability has become, it just doesn't come up anymore because there's been so much there. One of the barriers is also just making sure like our community has acceptance, that they're okay with some of the things we're doing. And we do a lot to radio ads and talking with getting comfortable with our local emergency management, making sure they're invited to come out and see how we do burns. And then also making sure that the burns that we do within our local group are open to anyone. The way we usually communicate our fires and our fire activity is through email. And I'll put anybody on that email list, and we'll invite anybody to a fire. And so if they're nervous about fire, and there's still people out there that are, we ask them with a personal ask, hey, how about you come to one of our fires? It's not even your fire, and just see how we do it. And that seems to open it up. So we make sure that our burn group is not a closed group, but that we're inviting everyone. And so, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of barriers there. I do see there's some groups, sometimes some PBAs that try and escalate too quickly, maybe, and try and take on too much beyond their capacity. And they're working on excitement, and they're just wanting to do good work. And sometimes they move beyond their capacity. And I think our group is doing really good work, but it took a few years of those 20, 30 acre fires to get there. And we took each step kind of in hand and did good work and took all of those barriers seriously. And it's been a lot of fun. And it's been really fun to see. I showed you the picture of the saw shop, to see how the community has wrapped it up. But that was through just intentional, making sure they all know how they fit within our burn story, even if they're not out there on the fires.
Amazing. Lori, do we have any more questions in the chat?
No, but I've just shared a couple links, some helpful links about the last Loup TREX if people are interested in signing up or learning more, and then a link to both of our websites as a reminder where the recording will be from this.
One thing I
Excellent.
would toss in there
Oh,
would be we have, if anybody here is working with a burn association, we have people. It was just mentioning to Roy. It's easy to put someone on our burn group email list. I've got people on our burn group email list all over the country that just want to take a peek into how we communicate, what we communicate, the different things that go on within our burn group. And if anyone here just wants to, if you're working with a burn group and you want to just kind of see from the outside what we have going on, you're sure welcome to be put on that email list. It's easy for me to do.
thank you, Ben. How can they access to that link so they can access the email list for you? Do you have a?
Yeah, you could just send something to my email and I can put that in the chat here.
That'll be great.
So you could send me something and just send me a message and just say I would like to be added to your burn email list, and I can throw you on there.
Awesome. Well, it's 12:02 here in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. I think we way over the time for the webinar. So I think if there is no more questions from the audience, I think we can start wrapping up. So I'm gonna say first of all, thank you, Ben. As again, this has been really inspiring, and thank you for your time and to facilitating all of those that knowledge and experience that you have with Pheasants Forever and the Prescribed Burn Associations in the Loup TREX. Thank you, Lori and Carol, at the Great Plains Fire Science Exchange, and Kat Sense from the Canadian Prairie Prescribed Fire Exchange for your collaboration in making this webinar series possible.